So can folks hear me okay online? Excellent. Thank you. So I have a feeling I'm going to be in this room by myself today. So far, no one has shown up, and the people that are usually here by now. At least one of the regular attendees I'm seeing online. So maybe sort of an odd day, and that's fine. Let me set up a couple of things quick. Come on, you can do it, little computer. Go to that thing up. It's not that one. It is. Hard. There. Okay, so the computer is hating on me in unexpected ways. There's a page won't load, and I'm not sure why. But I don't want to bog us down with this. Let me try one other thing, because maybe it's somehow a browser thing. Well, I hope not. So one thing I've done is I've changed the chat settings on our Zoom meeting so that if you post something to chat, it only comes to me. No one else will see it. Now that was it was possible before for you to send just me a chat message, but especially on this last day when we've got, I want to try to get as many questions relevant to the final as possible. I've gone ahead and made the chat so that I'm the only person that will see it, and the hope here is that you'll ask as many questions as possible over the course of the, oops, that's not the one. There we go. Over the course of the class period. So looking at the things that were posted on Canvas through last night, there were two themes that came up a fair bit that I wanted to try to talk about today. One of them is the problem I'm having with the computer. So we'll have to wing that one if we talk about that. So one is several people said that they had issues about how to resolve variables and how scoping worked. And there'd been some questions on the exams I was going to try to pull one of those up and talk about it, but for some reason, Canvas is being grumpy and not letting me access that. I'd like to go over some of that a little bit today because I do feel like that came up in a number of places, and certainly a number of people's questions have been related to scoping and errors of, this variable's undefined, what's going on? So I want to talk about that some. And then the other thing that clearly came up a number of times is a lot of people mentioned HTML as being a source of confusion. And I definitely want to talk about that. I think one of the issues there is I'm still struggling a little bit to figure out what the source of the confusion is. And I've got some thoughts on that, which I can share when we get there. But I would love, if there are specific things that you have found confusing about HTML or that were confusing, but now you kind of have figured out, I'd love to hear specific things because it's a little less clear what to do about, in general, HTML confuses me, which is a fair statement, right? I'm not criticizing the statement. It's just, it's a little hard to know what to do about that. Okay, well, for some reason, I can't seem to get at the example from exam 2, so we're going to make up a new one. And so I'm going to share my Jess. And as we go through this, please, please, please feel free to ask questions or share ideas in the chat. And you can also just speak up and say things. That would be awesome too. But if you're more comfortable talking in the chat, I'll be the only one who sees it. And I can try to, answer questions. So let me share Jess. Let's actually talk a little bit about scoping. Okay, so now that's sharing Jess, good. So I was hoping to kind of pull up one of the earlier examples, but we'll just make one up as we go. So I'm going to invent some variables and give them some values. Okay, so there I've got some variables. Now, if I load my program, I'm going to save this. CSci 1201 2020 1125.py. And I ask, what is the value of X? Then the answer is going to be, let's see, how could we do this easily? So actually, I'm going to ask everybody, and this should be an easy one. They'll get more interesting later, but I'm trying to make sure I understand kind of where people are. In the chat, in Zoom, and remember, I'm the only person who will see it, tell me what you think X is going to be when I hit enter here. So go, type. Tell me things. Excellent. A bunch of people said, oh, what? Oh, I didn't load. So your answer was right. It would be 7. It wasn't 7 because I hadn't loaded yet. So this error happened because I had not hit load yet. Once I had loaded, then you're right. It was 7. Awesome. And then similarly, if I said Y, I would get hello, and Z, I would get 14.2. So I think we're all good there. Now, make this a little bigger so we can see more at the top and the bottom. So if I say define X to, we'll just print X for now. Well, actually, no, let's print X and print Y. And if I load that, and if I type F of 5, again, in the chat, it's going to print two values. What are the two values it's going to print? And you could say, I don't have a clue, right? That would be a legitimate answer because that would be helpful. Three people. Come on, do. Okay. That's four people. That's five people. Okay. So we've got some right answers and we've got some incomplete answers and we've got some partially right answers. So let me hit the button. We get 5 and we get hello. So the first question is, how do we get 5? So X, here, let's see, I can annotate, I can draw, let's green line. X here, where does it get its value from? Python, when you're inside a function and Python's trying to find the value of a variable, it initially looks inside that function to see somewhere in here is X been given a value. And if it has, I'm going to use that one. And if it hasn't, then I will look elsewhere. Well, in this case, X has a value that is provided right here. So because X is an argument to F, X gets its value when F is called, and this X refers to this X here. Okay? This is why this X is actually this guy down here. Because the 5 gets associated with the X here, which then is used here. And so that's why this is going to be a 5, because it's this 5 coming from here. Are there questions about that? Are there things I can say more about or clarify about that piece of the puzzle? Going. So then what happens with Y? Let me get a different color. Y, it looks inside F, and there's no place where Y is defined. It's not a parameter. It's not defined as a local variable here. Y just doesn't have a value anywhere. So then it looks outside to see earlier has somebody defined Y, and the answer to that is yes. Y got defined right here. And so that Y is going to be hello. So this is why f of 5 prints 5, because that's the value we sent in here, and hello, because Y doesn't have a value inside F, and so it uses the global value up there. Now, if there was a question on the exam that wasn't just what is F print, because you could always just type this code in and find out what F did without understanding why it did it. But there was a question where you had to explain why X was going to be 5 and why Y was going to be hello. Could you do that? Would you feel comfortable doing that? Are there things I can do that would help make that clearer or less confusing for you? Questions? Okay, let's make this a little more complicated. Now I'm going to erase all the scribbles because it'll make it hard to see. And then we're going to define another function, g. And g is going to take x and y, and it's going to call f of y, and then it's going to print x. Load program, save the program. If I call g of, let's say, z comma y, so this is more complicated. This is going to print three things, because f prints two things, so we're going to get two prints from f. We'll get a third print here. So this is going to print three things. So the question is, what three values is this going to print? So take a second, look at the code, and when you feel like you've got it figured out, trying to, go ahead and type that in. So there should be, you should be providing three values that this is going to print, because f is going to print two values, and then g is going to print a third value. So your answer should have, in a perfect world, three different values. So we definitely got more confusion here. There's question marks in some of the answers indicating uncertainty. One of the things that's interesting and actually probably very helpful for me, so thank you for providing this feedback, is a couple of people had literally the letters Y or Z in their answer. Okay, I can promise you this will not print any Y's or Z's. All of these variables, X, Y, and Z, will have a value, and it will always print the value of the variable. And so it's never going to print Y or Z. It's always going to print some, either a number, 7, 14.2, or it's going to print the string hello. Those are actually the only values that exist in the universe here. And so it's definitely going to be one of these three values, but it'll never be Y or Z. To print Y or Z, we would actually have to print something like, we'd have to have something like, well, actually, if we change this to be the string X, then it would print X, the letter X, and not the value of X. But we don't have any strings like that here. So this is always going to print a value of our variable, okay? So let's see what it does, and then we'll take it apart and try to make sense of it. So it prints hello, hello, and 14.2, which actually one of you got. Yay! Another person might have been in the neighborhood. It's not clear what order they intended from the way the things got printed. So there's another person that might have been close or had it actually right. So how does that work? How do we get hello, hello, and 14.2? So let's first think about what's going on with our variables. So X, when we call G of Z So the first thing here, Z is, because we haven't defined Z anywhere, Z is going to actually refer to this guy up here. So Z is 14.2. That is what is being passed in for X here. So Z is 14.2. Z is being passed in for X. That tells us that this last thing is going to be 14.2. Because when we print X, it's going to look inside this function G for a definition. It's going to find one right here in the parameter. Then it's going to say, well, what was that? That was the value that was sent to me, which was Z. Well, what was that? That's the value defined globally over here, which is 14.2. Now that's a lot. Questions about that? Does this help? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes, no, maybe? Got a couple of thumbs up and a lot of silence. Okay. Hard to know if this is useful or not. Now, y, okay, let's actually chase f of y here, a different color, yellow. Actually, yellow might not stand up very well. Let's do blue. So y here gets its value from here. This is y here. The value of y here comes all the way back up to hello. So the value of y here is hello. That gets passed in here as hello. And notice that the fact that these are both named y, there was nothing magic in that. There's no connection there. It's because this is the second argument and this is the second argument. Right here, these had different names. They still connected because they were in the first position. These are connected because they're in the second position, not because they have the same name. So hello is the value of y. That's what gets passed in here. That's what gets sent to F, which means that this gets sent here. So this is still hello, which means this is hello. Because X, this value of X, it looks inside the definition of F and says, does X get defined anywhere in here? Yes, it does right here. So this is going to be whatever is sent to me. Well, what's sent to me is the value of y. What's the value of y? Oh, it's what was sent to G as the second argument. What was sent to G as the second argument? Oh, y out here. Well, what's y out here? That is the string hello. So all of this light blue gets us that this X is hello. And that's why we print the first hello right here. Okay. And to be consistent with the color scheme, we got the 14.2 from the green. And now this other Y, orange, it does not have a definition inside of F. There's no definition of Y there. So this is going to refer to this guy here, the global definition of Y. And that's why this one is also hello. So one of the hellos was fairly directly just boom, global value, done. Whereas the other was this long chain of events that got us eventually back to, it turns out, the same variable. But it's not at all obvious, well, there's no way to know, in fact, that these would be the same thing here, because it's not even always true. It just happened to be true because of the way we call G, right? If we call G with different arguments, mouse, actually, I'm going to need to erase this. We're not going to be able to see anything. Before I erase it, does anybody have any questions about the scribbling? There's a lot of scribbling there. Questions in chat? Questions? Speak up. Questions? Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll talk about HTML some. So I'm going to clear this. Boom. Now I'm going to call G with 16 and, well, let's see, let's call it frog and 16. Okay, so now this is again going to print 3 values. In the chat, what 3 values do you think we're going to get? So I got 1 answer. Got 2 answers. Three answers. 4 answers. 5 answers. 6 answers. Okay. So let's see. It's interesting. No 2 answers are the same. So if this was a democracy about what's right, which it isn't, because math is what's right, not us as people, but if this was a vote, there would be no winner. It would be an NY tie for first or last, depending on how you want to think about it, with every person voting for a different answer. So let's walk through what's going to happen. So let's start with, let's actually start with this X, because the X is probably the easiest. Because, whoa, hello. I lost my whiteboard. That's weird. I'm going to stop sharing and then share again. My whiteboard disappeared on me. And I'm hoping it will just reappear. Oh, I wasn't on the whiteboard. I was sharing Jess. There we go. Okay. Whew. That was weird. I don't know what I did there. Okay. So let's start with X. So X is going to get its value from this X. This X is whatever is the first argument in the call to G, which is frog. So the last thing that is printed should be frog. Okay? Which is what most people said. So most people had frog as the last thing being printed. So if you did that, you are correct. Now, we are also passing 16 to y. So y has the value 16. And that means this y here has the value 16. It gets it from its argument. That means this is 16 here, which means that this is 16 here. So this gets its value from here, which gets its value from here, which gets its value from here, which gets its value from here. So the first thing we're going to print is 16. And most people said 16 was the first thing. So go team. Good on that. So if you said 16 was the first thing printed, you were completely correct. Now we got to figure out what y is. Color orange. Y is again coming from here. Because y isn't provided here, this y is always going to be hello. No matter what value we pass in for f, the second thing that f prints is always going to be hello. So the answer here is going to be 16 hello frog, which would be, oh, I think I said no two people have the same answer. I lied. Actually, there are two people that said 16 hello frog. So I was wrong about that. I can't read my own thing. So the two people that said 16 hello frog, full marks to you. You are correct. So let's actually do it. No, 16 hello frog. Yeah. Questions about that? Was that useful? Yay, nay? Okay. Do we feel like we've done enough with that and it would be good to move on to HTML? That would be my inclination at this point. Is there anybody who's got a question about this or wants to stay on this for a second? Or are we good here? Okay, I will take that as we're good here. So I'm going to clear the annotations again so that we don't have all that mud all over the world. And I'll try to make sure I get this posted. I think we're all caught up on videos now. And I think that once I get this one posted, we'll have all the videos that made sense to post should be online. So you can go back and rewatch anything that you find helpful in preparation for the final. So let's talk about HTML a little bit. So I think one thing that may be part of the problem there, but I don't know this for sure, right? I'm doing a little guessing here. Is I think some people are confusing, are not clear on the fact that when we do the HTML stuff, it's really just strings. That's all that's happening with the HTML. And we don't really need to, there's nothing kind of magic about the HTML-ness of it. They're just strings. They happen to be strings with a certain format, a certain pattern to them, but they're just strings. And everything we do is just string stuff, okay? So, what would be a good example? Let's imagine, trying to strike a balance between too simple and too complicated. Okay. let's imagine we have a section of text where each, or let's say we have several sections of text, where each section has a header, kind of a title, and a single paragraph of content. So it might look something like dogs, random paragraph about dogs. Cats, random paragraph about cats. And geckos, random paragraph about geckos. Paragraphs probably should have periods. So we've got content of this form. Who cares why we have content of that form? But we do. And we want to like make it look pretty in HTML. Okay. Notice we might do this without HTML. Maybe all we want to do is make sure that the headers are in all caps and that there's a blank line between the header and the paragraph, and then another blank line, and then the next header in all caps, and then a blank line. So we could write a Python program that formats this way just fine without using HTML. And that'd be a totally reasonable thing to do. But we could also do it in HTML. We could also use other formatting systems. So HTML is not the only formatting system in the world. A very common one in the software development universe is a thing called Markdown. We could do this in Markdown if we wanted to. I'm not going to get into Markdown on the last day of classes, but it exists and we could do that. So nothing magic about HTML here. It's all just strings. It's all just text. So what I want to do is I want to write a function, let's call it layout sections, that takes a list of pairs where each pair has two elements. The first element, each pair is a string that is the title. And the second element is a string that is the paragraph of content that goes with that title. So we might have a call that looks like layout sections. So we're going to have a list of pairs. So let's say the first pair is dogs and, paragraph about dogs. That's a pair. And then cats, and paragraph about cats. And geckos, paragraph about geckos. Now this is hard to see on one line because it's gotten really long. But this is the idea, is we call layout sections with a list. So we'd have the square bracket for the list. And then each item in the list is going to be a pair, a tuple, with two things in it. And each tuple is going to have a title and content. And then we're going to have, in this case, 3 such tuples. We got this tuple, and we have the cat's tuple, and we have the gecko's tuple. Now that's a fair bit going on. It's a fairly complicated collection of data. Does anybody have any questions about the data itself before we actually try to make this work? In the chat, can everybody say sort of how comfortable you feel with where we are? Like, yes is like, I'm pretty happy. No, I'm pretty confused. Meh, I think I get it, but I don't feel super comfortable. Some sort of short thing. So I got 1 answer, got 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you. That really helps a lot. I should have been doing this, I think, a lot earlier. Thank you. That definitely helps. And if you've got questions, definitely ask. So let's do layout sections. Now, we have a list of tuples. We need to do something for everything in a list. If we need to do something for everything in a list, that is almost always a for loop. It could be mapped if we want to get fancy. But for the moment, let's start with for loops. And if we have time, we could talk about how we might have turned it into maps. But let's start with for loops. So we're going to have to say for S in sections. Okay? So we want to do something for each section. And to simplify things, I'm actually going to write a little helper function, layout single section. It does S for us. Okay? And for the moment, let's be really like stupid, just because it'll allow us to move on. And we're just going to return the string frog. That's clearly wrong, but that's okay, right? It'll give us something so we can actually see what we're doing down here in layout sections, and then we can worry about making this work. So if I have this, let's try it. Let's load this up. Save. Let me copy all of this. Everything, yeah. Copy and paste. Back here. And hit return. We get nothing back. Well, that's interesting. So why do we get nothing here? Anybody have a suggestion for why we're getting absolutely nothing back? Do we have a return anywhere in layout sections? I think the answer is no. And if we don't have a return, we're not going to get anything back. Layout sections might do a ton of work. We're not going to know about it because it didn't return anything. So we're probably going to need a return. Now, we could put a return here. Let's try that and see what that does. That returned frog once. That's not good, because we got 3 sections. We would have expected 3 frogs in a perfect world. We did not get 3 frogs. And that's because we put the return inside the for loop. The return returned immediately. As soon as the first time through the loop happened, we hit the return. Return ends layout sections and is done. So it got frog back here from layout single section and said, ooh, I have frog. Here, have frog. I am done. And then the loop was done, the function was done, everything was finished. So we just got one frog. So that's not very helpful. So we don't want the return in the loop. We want it here. The problem is return what? And this is where on almost any HTML or even just string problem, or often array problem, if you're building a collection of things up, you're building up a list of squares of numbers, or you're building up a little pyramid of asterisks. All of these things, we usually have some kind of result variable that starts out with some value, and then we add the pieces as we go, and then we return result. So this pattern of initialize result to some kind of reasonable starting value, then build up the answer by combining the old result with some new value, and then returning the result at the end. This pattern comes up over and over and over again. And so this is really common. And this is the thing we're going to want to use here. Okay. Then a question is, what's a reasonable starting value for result? So actually in the chat, everybody type in something you think would be a reasonable starting value for result here. Okay. 2 answers, 3 answers, 4 answers. Only 4 answers so far. Go ahead and take a stab in the dark. There we go. There's a 5th answer. One more person, maybe? Okay, everybody got it right. Yep. That submitted something. We want the empty string. So that, or if you prefer 2 single quotes, doesn't matter. In Python, I tend to write double quotes, old habit. So if we start with the empty string, then we'll be taking that and adding these other layout pieces to it. And so if we load this program and then we run our thing again, hey, we get frog, frog, frog. That's a win. We now have a frog for every section. Now the frog's wrong, but at least we got the right number of things, right? And if I put another pair in, let's just put in 2 empty strings so we don't have a super long thing. We get 4 frogs. That's awesome. Okay, so we've accomplished a useful thing. And I would encourage you to try to think about building your stuff incrementally like this, especially if it feels complicated, right? And if it helps to have a helper function that does something stupid initially, like just return frog all the time, then that's fine, right? That lets you see that, oh, look, I got 4 frogs. Yay me. Now we need to turn this into something, okay? So, are we cool with where we are? Give me a status update quick in chat. How you're feeling? Good, bad, in between? Okay. Awesome. Sounding pretty good. So, now we got to do the section. Now this is where the HTML part's actually going to finally kick in. So a section is going to have a title and a body, or let's say context. So we can use that weird notation to extract the 2 pieces from a pair. So section should be a pair with the title in the first slot and the contents in the second slot. So this will actually let us take the two pieces out and gives them names. So we refer to title will be, say, dogs the first time, and contents will be paragraph about dogs. And then when we call it with this pair, title will be cats, and the contents will be paragraphs about cats. Okay? Now, I'm going to want to make a header. Let's say we're going to make an H2 header. So the header will be H2 plus title plus close H2. And here again, there's nothing magic about the HTML here. This is all just strings. We just need to have a special string here and a special string here to make the HTML part work, but it's all just strings as far as Python's concerned. This is a string, this is a string, and this is a string, and we're just appending three strings. In Python's universe, that is all that's happening, is we're appending three strings, boom, done. They happen to be magic strings in the sense that they have to be these HTML open tag and close tags, but Python doesn't know anything about that or care anything about that. One thing I saw somebody do recently that was informative and wrong, but told me something useful, is somebody tried, oops, that should be H2. Somebody tried doing this. And the problem there is that this is not, like, Python's going to see that as a variable. And it's going to look in this function definition for a variable called H2, and it's not going to find one. You're going to get an undefined variable error. And you would get a similar problem over here. It would actually, it would probably treat this as division. And so it would see plus and then divide next to each other and go, man, you're missing a number somewhere. There should have been something between these two. And then it would try to divide by H2 and say, I still don't know what H2 is. So this does not work because you need these to be strings. These can't be non-string things, or this isn't going to function. So we need something like this where we're saying, hey, the header is H2 as a string, the title, and close H2 again as a string. And we're just going to append those things together. Questions? And then the contents, so the paragraph is going to be the same thing. We have a P tag plus contents plus close P. There we go. And then we return. Actually, I'm going to ask in the chat, what do we return here? Given that we've built the header and we've built the paragraph, type in the chat, what do we return at this point? And 2 answers. Three answers. Let's hear from a couple other people. Yeah, that's the 4th answer. One more. You can do it, peeps. Come through for me. Okay, let's roll with what we got. So most everybody said the same thing. One thing that somebody said was returning the paragraph. Let's actually try that and see what that does. And if we do that, then all we get are the paragraphs. we don't have any of the headers. So that's not right because this leaves out this part, okay? So the right answer, which is what several people said, is that. We'd want to take the header appended to the paragraph. And remember, the header is just a string, and the paragraph's just a string. So we plus two strings together, and we're just running two strings together. That's all that's happening here, okay? So if we load that, and we run it, we get H2 dogs, close H2. P, paragraph about dogs, close P. H2 cats, close H2. P, paragraph about cats, close P. H2 geckos, close H2. P, paragraph about geckos, close P. H2 nothing, close H2. P, nothing, close P. And those last things are from these empty strings here. So it put an empty string between the two H2s, and it put an empty string between the two P's. And that would be correct. So that would lay out some sections using this form, and we would get this piece. Notice this isn't a complete HTML page. This is just a section of a page. You would still need the doc type and the header and the body and all that other surrounding stuff, but this would format a subset of a web page for us. So this would be similar to the UL-OL problem from earlier. Okay. A little more complicated because it's got the title and the paragraph, but it's the same kind of idea. Questions? Give me how you feeling in the chat. Good, thank you. That's nice. I'm glad that helped. So now we've got 10 minutes. And so the real question is, what do we do with the next 10 minutes? Do people have questions about the scoping or questions about the HTML that you'd like to follow up on? Or does anybody have some other question about some other part of the course that you'd like to talk about? One thing we could do is actually we could convert layout sections here to use map instead of a loop, if people would find that to be a useful exercise. Or we could do something completely different if somebody's got a suggestion. Out loud or in the chat, anything? Okay. Then let's actually just do the map thing in the absence of any, because there were a couple of questions about maps. So we've got a function here that takes a section and returns the string that is the HTML for that section. So in theory, I'm actually going to take all of this and I'm going to give that a name because having to type this over and over again is going to get annoying. Sections, and let's say example sections. Boom, boom, okay. So we've got our example sections. Yeah. I can say map, what do I call it? Layout single section. Layout single section takes a section and returns a string. This is a list of sections. Map takes a list as the second argument and a function that takes things from that list and returns new things. Okay? So often in the examples that we've looked at, the new things had the same type as the old things. So if we squared a number, we were taking a number and returning a number. But here we're actually going to take a section and return a string. So this is going to take a list of sections and return a list of strings. And, oh, I called it example sections because I'm not very smart. Example sections. And lo and behold, we've got a list, okay, of what? It's a list of strings. Right? That's a string, it's in quotes. It happens to be HTML-y stuff, but it's just a string as far as Python's concerned. And this is a string, and this is a string, and this is a fairly short string. Now, that's not a single string. Layout sections was supposed to give us a single string. But if we've got a list of strings and we want to put them into a single string, join from earlier in the semester will do that for us. Boom. We have a single string that is the same as calling the example sections on that same string. So this funky single join map thing does the same thing as layout sections, which means we could rewrite layout sections if layout sections with map sections return join map layout single section sections. Close, close. Boom. So now that ought to do the same thing. Layout sections with map, example sections. Boom, works fine. Now, whether you find this more or less confusing than this is a matter of opinion and perspective and probably experience. But it's important to sort of be aware that both versions exist. And this would be actually a nice example of using map where we get to avoid the whole for loop. We avoid having to come up with a name for S. We avoid having to come up with a name for result and doing the joining explicitly, because that's all done by join here for us. So we had to use join and map, right? So we had to use these fancy things, but in return, we get this one-liner that avoids the for loop and having to introduce a bunch of names. You know, whether that's, you see that as a win or not is probably a matter of perspective. And my experience is that people that are new to map find this very confusing, actually, and would rather just write for loops. But once you've got some experience, actually, a map like this is a really, really nice tool. And it can simplify a lot of things and just avoid certain kinds of errors. There's a lot of ways you can screw things up with a for loop. Get the naming wrong, blah, 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 blah. There's just some things you can't do wrong. If the map works at all, it probably works correctly. So I don't know if that helped any or not, but hopefully a little bit. So we have 3 minutes. Are there any questions? I will pass out the take-home version of the final on Friday. We will have the in-class part of the final Tuesday afternoon at the scheduled finals time. I will set up some office hours with the same kind of calendar appointment thing, and I'll have the link on Canvas for Monday and Tuesday. I might even set up some time on Friday or Saturday. I'll let you know in case somebody wants to start early. And then we'll be done with the class, be all over. So hopefully this was some help, and stay safe and wash your hands and wear your mask, even when you're sitting in a big empty room like I am today. And I hope you have a good break. Short break between now and finals, and longer break between finals and next semester. And if there's anything I can help with, definitely let me know. Any other questions, comments? I'll share the code from today and the video. I'll get those up as soon as I can, so that you'll have all that. And hopefully we'll be in good shape. Okay, well, it has been a pleasure. I wish I had been able to see more of you in person more often. You know, you're an interesting group of people, and I've enjoyed working with you. It's a shame we had to do it this way, but that's what 2020 has all been about. And hopefully next semester, we'll get through next semester, and maybe with a little luck by fall semester next year, we'll have enough vaccine in the universe that we can begin to interact more traditionally and have a room full of people again. So thank you all very much. I will see you later. Good luck. Stay safe. Ciao.